There is a kind of tiredness that comes honestly. It follows a busy afternoon, a poor night of sleep, a long drive, or the ordinary demands of life. Most people know that feeling. They rest, they slow down, and little by little their strength returns. But there is another kind of fatigue that feels different. It does not arrive after effort, it settles in quietly and stays. It makes small tasks feel strangely heavy. It turns familiar routines into something that feels farther away than it should. For many seniors, this kind of exhaustion is easy to excuse. Age becomes the explanation for almost everything. A person says, "I'm not as young as I used to be," and leaves the matter there. Sometimes that sounds practical, sometimes it sounds wise, but sometimes it is simply a way of protecting oneself from worry. It is easier to call something normal than to admit that the body may be asking for more attention than it used to need. What makes unusual fatigue so easy to overlook is that it rarely arrives with drama. It does not always announce itself with pain or fear. It may appear as a reluctance to go out, a need to sit down halfway through a chore, or a sense that the day has become too long before noon has even passed. A once pleasant walk starts feeling like a burden. A short conversation becomes draining. Even getting dressed may seem to take more effort than it once did. This matters not because every tired day is dangerous, but because persistent fatigue can quietly change a person's life. It can narrow the world. Activities are postponed. Calls go unanswered. Meals become simpler, shorter, less nourishing. The house feels larger, the stairs steeper, the evenings longer. A person may think they are simply slowing down, when in truth they are adapting to something their body has not yet fully explained. There is also an emotional side to fatigue that few people speak about. Constant exhaustion can feel humiliating. It can make a proud person feel unreliable, dependent, or older than they want to believe they are. Some seniors hide it even from family, not because they are careless, but because they want to protect their dignity. Yet dignity is not lost by noticing change. More often, it is preserved by refusing to look away from it. The body does not always shout first. Often it whispers, and fatigue is one of its quietest warnings. When energy changes in a lasting, unfamiliar way, it deserves respect. Not panic, not denial, respect. Because the difference between ordinary tiredness and a deeper problem is not always loud enough to force attention. Sometimes it must be noticed by a person who still values the life they have built and understands that peace is often protected in the smallest moments of awareness. That same quiet shift can appear not only in energy, but in breath and pressure, where the body begins to reveal that something deeper may be changing beneath the surface. Breathing is so constant, so automatic, that most people do not think about it until something changes. A person walks to the mailbox and feels slightly winded. They carry groceries and need a longer pause than usual. They climb a few steps and notice a tightness in the chest, or a strange pressure across the shoulders. Because these sensations can come and go, many seniors learn to explain them away. They blame weather, stress, poor sleep, or simply a body that is no longer young. But changes in breathing have a way of revealing more than a person wants to admit. Breathlessness can feel like weakness, and weakness is hard for proud people to accept. Some would rather move more slowly than speak honestly about what has changed. They shorten their walks. They sit more often. They stop doing certain tasks without ever naming the reason. In time, their world quietly adjusts around a problem they have not fully faced. Chest discomfort can be even more misleading. Many people expect danger to feel dramatic, sharp, unmistakable, but discomfort is not always severe. It may feel like pressure, heaviness, tightness, or a vague ache that spreads into the back, neck, jaw, or arms. It may pass quickly and leave behind only uncertainty. That uncertainty is part of what makes it so easy to dismiss. When pain is not intense, people often convince themselves it is nothing important. Yet what deserves attention is not just intensity, it is change. When breathing becomes harder during ordinary activity, or when pressure appears where it did not belong before, the body may be marking a line between old normal and new normal. That line should not be crossed carelessly. A person who once moved freely but now feels held back by breath or discomfort is not imagining things. The body keeps careful records even when the mind wants to bargain with them. There is also a loneliness to these symptoms. Breathlessness can make conversation harder. Chest discomfort can create a silent fear that a person carries alone in a crowded room. Even while smiling at family or finishing a meal, someone may be quietly wondering if the body is becoming less trustworthy. That question can be frightening, especially for those who live alone or take pride in managing life without help. Still, the purpose of noticing these signals is not to live in fear. It is to remain honest. A life built over decades deserves that honesty. The goal is not to turn every discomfort into catastrophe. It is simply to understand that when breathing changes or pressure appears, the body may be asking for calm attention before it is forced to ask more urgently. And sometimes urgency does not begin in the chest at all. Sometimes it begins in the feet, in the legs, or in that small moment when balance no longer feels as dependable as it once did. A senior may not remember the exact day balance began to change. Often there is no clear beginning, only a series of small moments that do not seem important on their own. A hand reaches for the wall where it never needed to before. Rising from a chair brings a brief wave of lightheadedness. Turning too quickly creates a strange sense of being unsteady in one's own home. These moments are often brushed aside, especially when they pass quickly. But what passes quickly can still leave behind a serious message. Dizziness is unsettling because it shakes confidence as much as it shakes the body. A person begins to move more carefully, then more slowly, then less often. They avoid stairs, crowded places, long walks, or even certain rooms at night. What starts as caution can become quiet confinement. Independence does not usually disappear all at once. More often it is reduced by tiny negotiations with fear. A person tells themselves they're being sensible, but part of them knows they're shrinking their world. Balance changes also carry a hidden emotional cost. Falling is not only a physical danger, it is a threat to identity. Many seniors fear the fall that changes everything more than they fear pain itself. They fear becoming dependent, being watched too closely, losing privacy, losing choice. That is why episodes of dizziness or unsteadiness should never be treated as small embarrassments. They reach far beyond the moment itself. They touch a person's sense of safety, confidence, and control. Swelling in the legs, ankles, or feet can be just as easy to minimize. Shoes feel tighter, socks leave deeper marks. By evening, the feet seem heavier. Some people assume it is a harmless result of sitting too long or getting older, but swelling can be one of those quiet physical changes that speaks clearly if someone is willing to listen. The body may be holding on to more than it should, and sometimes that excess shows itself first in the lower body, where heaviness gathers slowly and without much drama. The reason these signs matter together is that they often affect ordinary life before they seem serious enough to mention. A person may not describe themselves as ill. They simply say they have become more careful, more tired, less eager to go out. Their routines shrink. Their confidence narrows. Their family notices them sitting more, walking less, hesitating longer at the curb or the doorway. What looks like simple aging may sometimes be something that deserves a closer look. There is wisdom in paying attention before a crisis forces the issue. A body that feels unsteady or swollen is not necessarily failing, but it may be struggling in ways that deserve compassion and notice. And when strength and steadiness begin to shift, another quiet warning may appear alongside them: a fading appetite, a gradual loss of weight, and a body becoming smaller without permission. Food is one of the simplest ways people stay connected to life. A good breakfast can begin a day with steadiness. A shared meal can keep loneliness from settling too deeply. Even eating alone, there is dignity in preparing something warm, something familiar, something that says life is still worth tending. That is why a loss of appetite can mean more than a change in hunger. It can signal a change in the body, in mood, in energy, or in the quiet will that carries a person through the day. For seniors, appetite often fades in ways that are easy to miss. Meals become smaller. Cooking feels like too much trouble. Favorite foods lose their comfort. A person may begin skipping lunch without noticing, or replacing supper with crackers and tea, not because they have chosen to eat less, but because hunger no longer speaks as clearly as it once did. If no one else is around to observe the change, weeks can pass before the pattern becomes visible. Weight loss can be even more deceptive. At first, some people welcome it. Clothes fit differently. The mirror seems kinder. In a culture that often praises losing weight, unplanned weight loss can be mistaken for good news. But when pounds disappear without intention, especially later in life, the body may be using its reserves in a way that deserves careful thought. Strength can fade before a person realizes it. Muscles thin quietly. Stamina weakens. A person stands up and feels less solid than they used to. There is also an emotional truth hidden inside. Appetite changes. Many seniors do not stop eating because they no longer care about health. Sometimes they stop because meals no longer feel meaningful. Cooking for one can feel very different from cooking for a household. Grief can flatten hunger. Fatigue can remove the energy required to shop, prepare, chew, and clean up. Even minor discomfort can slowly turn eating from pleasure into obligation. The body may be asking for help, while the heart is carrying a quieter burden of its own. What makes this warning so important is that it affects the whole person. Less food can mean less strength, less steadiness, less patience, less resilience. It can deepen weakness that is already present and make recovery from even minor setbacks harder. A body that is not nourished becomes more fragile, and fragility often arrives without announcement. One day a person is just not that hungry, and some time later they realize they are also colder, weaker, and more easily exhausted. To notice this kind of change is not vanity, and it is not overreaction. It is a form of care. The body is not asking to be judged. It is asking to be observed with honesty. When appetite disappears or weight slips away without explanation, the deeper concern is not appearance. It is vitality, strength, and the quiet architecture of independence. And among all the signals the body can give, perhaps none feels more personal or more frightening than the moment a person begins to wonder whether the change is not in the body alone, but in the mind itself. There are few experiences more unsettling than feeling unfamiliar inside one's own mind. A missed name can be shrugged off. A forgotten appointment can happen to anyone. Most people understand that memory is not a perfect instrument, especially with time, but there is a difference between ordinary forgetfulness and the quiet shock of feeling mentally altered in a way that is new, sudden, or difficult to explain. That feeling can be deeply lonely because it touches the most private part of a person's identity. A senior may notice it in small ways first. A task that was once routine suddenly feels confusing. A familiar route seems less familiar. The right word does not come, and then another does not come after that. The room feels strange for a moment, or time feels slightly out of order. These moments can pass quickly, which is part of why they are often hidden or dismissed. A person may feel embarrassed, even ashamed, and decide not to speak of it. Silence becomes a way of protecting dignity, but silence can also increase fear. When the mind feels different, people often begin watching themselves closely. They become suspicious of their own thoughts. They worry after every forgotten detail. They fear what family might assume. They fear being treated differently, being talked around instead of talked to, being seen as fragile before they understand what is happening. This fear can be heavier than the symptom itself. It can turn one confusing moment into weeks of private anxiety. What deserves attention is not perfection of memory. It is disruption, sudden confusion, noticeable changes in thinking, unusual disorientation, or a clear sense that the mind is not behaving as it normally does can be important. The mind is part of the body's warning system too. When it feels altered, that change should not be brushed aside simply because it is uncomfortable to name. Some signs are painful because they challenge pride. Still, pride should not be asked to carry what honesty is better suited to bear. There is something profoundly human about wanting to remain yourself in the eyes of others. Seniors have earned the right to be spoken to with patience and respect, especially when their thoughts feel less steady. To notice mental changes is not to surrender identity. In many cases, it is an act of preserving it. A person protects dignity not by pretending confusion never happened, but by refusing to let fear dictate silence. The mind deserves the same gentle seriousness as the heart, the lungs, the legs, the appetite. It is not separate from the rest of the body's story. It is part of that story, and sometimes the most tender part. When the mind begins to feel different, the right response is not panic. It is compassion, honesty, and a willingness to treat change as worthy of attention. Because in the end, all 7 signals point toward the same truth. Peace is not built by ignoring the body's warnings, but by meeting them early while there is still room for choice. By the time people reach their later years, they have learned many kinds of endurance. They have lived through grief, uncertainty, disappointment, recovery, and change. They know that not every ache carries meaning, and not every difficult day is a sign of disaster. That hard-earned perspective can be a strength. It can keep life steady, but sometimes the same strength becomes a reason to endure too much in silence. A person becomes so practiced at carrying on that they stop noticing when carrying on has become unusually hard. That is the deeper message behind these signals. Fatigue, shortness of breath, chest or upper body discomfort, dizziness, swelling, weight loss, appetite changes, and new confusion do not all mean the same thing. They are different experiences with different emotional textures and different levels of urgency, but they share one quiet truth. They are departures from what used to feel normal, and in later life, departures from normal deserve to be met with calm respect, not stubborn delay. Independence is often misunderstood. Many people imagine it means handling everything alone, saying little, needing little, asking nothing of anyone. But true independence is not silence. It is the ability to remain present in one's own life, to notice change without losing composure, to respond before choices become narrower. A senior who pays attention early is not becoming dependent. In many cases, that person is protecting the very freedom they hope to keep. There is great dignity in early honesty, writing down when something began, noticing what feels new, admitting that a certain walk feels harder, that the stairs seem different, that meals are less appealing, that balance is not what it was, that the mind has had a few moments it cannot easily explain. These are not dramatic acts, they are mature acts. They reflect a life seasoned by experience, not ruled by fear. What often harms people is not only the symptom itself, but the delay shaped by pride, uncertainty, or hope that things will simply disappear. Sometimes they do, sometimes they do not. And when they do not, time quietly changes the situation. Problems that might have been manageable become more disruptive. Strength becomes harder to regain. Confidence becomes harder to rebuild. The body, which once whispered, is then forced to speak more loudly. The gentlest wisdom is often the strongest. It says there is no shame in noticing, no weakness in care, no loss of dignity in taking one's own changes seriously. Later life asks for a different kind of courage than youth. Not speed, not toughness, clarity, patience, a willingness to listen to the body before the body is cornered into shouting, and perhaps that is the quiet promise inside all of this. Peace does not come from believing nothing will ever change. Peace comes from meeting change with steadiness when it arrives. The senior who notices early, reflects honestly, and allows concern to become thoughtful action is not surrendering to age. That person is practicing wisdom, and wisdom, more than denial, is what helps preserve independence, self-respect, and the calm life so many hope to keep. If you want, I can now turn this into a voice-ready documentary narration version with more cinematic rhythm and pauses, or into a scene-by-scene script formatted for video production.